Peter Pichler. He is the founder of Peter Pichler Architecture in Milan, together with his wife, Silvana Ordinas. He has worked with renowned architecture offices like Zaha Hadid Architects in London, Delugan Macy in Vienna, and OMA Remkoolhaas in Rotterdam. Peter believes that architecture must have a strong bond with the culture and history of a specific place. He is interested in the analysis and research of vernacular architecture, materials, and elements that combine with technology that can express a contemporary interpretation of the past. So can I please put your hands together for Mr. Peter Pichler?
So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here today. And maybe I just want to start a little bit my personal journey into the world of architecture. So basically I was doing a very technical high school back in Italy, and after that I didn't really know if what I wanted to do actually. I was not sure if I should do something more technical or more artistic. I didn't really know. And at that time I was lucky to meet the artist, famous artist, now unfortunately he's dead since a couple of years, Walter Pichler. That was a cousin of my dad. And Walter was really a true inspiration for me. He was really one of the driving forces, let's say, of the Vienna, Austria architecture scene, where offices like Coop Himmelblau, Wolf Brix, Haus Rucker, they were all in the 60s, 70s. Walter was into this movement. And he was having some exhibitions with Joseph Beuys and some other international famous artists. And when I met him, he was really encouraging me to study architecture and to see architecture not just as a technical profession, but it could be also something else. And I was basically lucky to, I was also just finishing high school, and he was asking me if I'm interested to just help him a little bit in drawing furniture on a project that we did here next to my hometown in Bolzano, in North Italy. So here you see my grandfather was a blacksmith, so you see his original headquarters, let's call it, here on the left. And this was the house, the project of Walter Pichler. And I was lucky to work a little bit on the furniture and to understand what architecture could also be. These are his sculptures that you see on the right, and he creates basically little houses for its art installations and sculptures. And this was kind of inspiration for me. Then I had a journey. I was working in Europe in different studios. This was actually my first internship in London when I was 20 years old at Zaha Hadid. I also thought it was my last day because I used Zaha's private toilet in the office, the restroom, so that was my first day. I thought it's going to be my last day. It was not. I was working there for a couple of years, also working for Remkoolhaas in Rotterdam. And in 2015, Silvana and myself created our office in Milan, in Italy. So this is an image of our office. We're a very young office in 2015, 4 years old, almost. And since then, we were actually lucky to win a couple of national and international competitions. So these are basically the work that we're doing in the office at the moment. So we have some different projects in North Italy, some hotel projects. We have some work in Abu Dhabi. We're working at the moment, where we have some residential developments and villas. These are other projects we're working on. On the left side, top is a project in the US. This is pretty new. I will talk about it later. Another project in Abu Dhabi. We were also lucky to win 2 years ago an international competition in the Netherlands. It's a development, a residential development, and we are a finalist as well in another international competition in the Middle East. We were also lucky to win some prizes the last years. We were nominated or a finalist at the Design Emerging Architect of the Year. We were nominated as Young Italian Talent and as well as the Medaglia d'Oro dell'Architettura Italiana. And today I want to talk a little bit about architecture beyond the physical perception. So what you see here is, I like this image, the iceberg. So what you see on the tip is basically the physical object, when we want to call it like this, of architecture. Well, what we have, of course, in the architecture world is everything what you see underneath here, the process and how to arrive to this physical object. So today I just don't want to talk about the physical object, but also the parameters that are influencing this architecture. So this is a little bit the credo of our office, that for us, context goes beyond the physical immediate context, but architecture is rather influenced by a lot of parameters. These parameters can be geographical, can be cultural, political, societal, economical. Of course, sustainability is a big issue these days. Technology and vernacular. Vernacular architecture is a very big theme in our office. So what means vernacular and what is vernacular architecture? This is a show of Bernard Rudowski, the architect, American architect, in the 60s at the MoMA, New York, called Architecture Without Architects. And what he explored in this show is basically vernacular architecture, hundreds and hundreds of years old, where people didn't build for a specific style, but it was for a certain need. They built with local materials. They were interested, or much more interested, I guess, than today, in the culture and tradition of buildings. One of my heroes, not just because I studied in Vienna, Adolf Loos. And I just want to read a quote of Adolf Loos. Changes in the traditional way of building are only permitted if they are an improvement. Otherwise, stay with what is traditional, for truth. Even if it be hundreds of years old, has a stronger inner bond with us than the lie that walks by our side. When I was a student, I think, a big fan of Le Corbusier. Here are his famous 5 points of architecture. What you see on the left side here is what you need to do in order to be more modern or contemporary versus the right side. If I look at this image here, especially on the right, the number 2, I'm not really sure if this is still needed or if this is still contemporary. I also think that today we don't talk about anymore. He was talking a lot about dividing residential, dividing office. I think today we talked about mixed-use development. Marc-Antoine Logère, he was probably the first really theory guy, if we call it like this, theoretical architect, even if it was not really an architect. And he came up with the concept of the primitive hut, where he basically explored the anthropological relationship of man and nature, and that this relationship is the foundation of creating architecture. So sometimes in our studio also we ask ourselves, do we want to go with tradition or do we have a revolution? And I think I want to answer this question at the end. If we see these images like classical modernism, every building looks the same. We have glass facade. Every building becomes a machine with air condition. There is no relationship anymore on a geographical level. Everything is possible everywhere. What we are interested in the office is actually images like we see here. And I want to start with first project that we did 3 years ago, winning competition in North Italy, the Oberholz Mountain Hut. So basically this is my hometown. Here is Milan, is our office in Italy. This is my hometown, and the competition site was 20 minutes from my hometown. It's a ski and hiking resort, very beautiful, in Oberreggen. And the client was asking in the brief for a mountain hut with a restaurant. So we are here on 2,000 meters. This is the famous mountain there in the region, the Latemar. It's part also of the UNESCO World Heritage, all the mountains, the Dolomites where I come from. So you should go to visit, it's nice. And down there was actually our site. So you see we have like very beautiful mountains, landscape, the woods. And when we visited the site, we recognized immediately this hut, like it's a very typical building with a sloped roof, a wood construction, that he used, of course, wood to create all the huts in the area because the wood is next to it, so it makes a lot of sense to use wood. And this is actually how we start our project. We don't really start with a kind of geometry or formal languages or something. We really start with a kind of research on tradition. So what you see, these images are really, as I was explaining before, vernacular structures from the area, wood constructions with sloped roofs. And I think that most of, or actually all of our competitions that we win are very, very simple concepts. In that case, the idea was to create a kind of fallen tree that is basically looking towards the main three mountains of the area, and that somehow can be a contemporary interpretation of the past, of the typical mountain hut. So we came up with this idea. This was the competition entry. You see this kind of three sloped roofs that are facing to the main mountains. The wood construction, you see here on top, this is the existing cable structure, so this was existing, and this is our new structure here. So you come down here, this is the ski slope, here you have a terrace, and from here you also can go hiking to the Latemarium, which is the mountain that we can see here on the top. So this was our competition entry. Here you see you arrive with the elevator, you can go down. This is already the construction. So we had a lot of debate here. You see the main three mountains that I was mentioning before. But the client, there was not a single client, but there were 8 people in this company. So there was a lot of debate because there is another mountain here in the background, the Mendel, that you don't see because it's foggy. So we were rotating the hut around for like probably 15 times till the client calls us at 7 o'clock in the morning and said, that's the position and that's how we're going to build it. So you see this almost fallen tree, this connection with nature of this building. And here you see it in the winter when people are skiing here. And again, you see this, as I explained before, this very typical sloped roof from the outside. It looks like a very typical structure from there. But then when it comes to the inside, this is what we call then the contemporary interpretation of it. So you see like these spaces here. In the region where I come from, there is a space that is called Stube, which is a very typical space, always made of wood. It's a very small, cozy space. Sometimes you have a chimney inside. And so what we tried to do with this project is to give a kind of contemporary interpretation of this Stube, of this very typical space. So we created this kind of open space Stube with this structure that is gradually fading from a roof into these walls to create like a certain privacy into these pockets almost that are looking outside and facing towards the nature. So you see here the restaurant. The plan is a very important, not just a graphical image for us, but it really explains the concept. In this case, you see the light gray here, which is the actual restaurant with the bar. So the public spaces versus behind we have the more private spaces, kitchen and storages. And at the same time, this concrete wall that you were seeing before here on the right side, you see it here in plan, and it's dividing the public space from the private one, but at the same time it defines exactly the line where the building is above ground and underneath ground. You see a section here. You see also the existing station. And at the beginning we had a discussion with the clients. We were winning the competition and he was asking us, yeah, but did you already build on 2,000 meters? We said like, no. But do you have experience? We said like, no. Can you do that? I said, let's try it. And he trusted us and he said, okay, let's do it. Here you see like construction images. So of course it's pretty challenging to build on 2,000 meters because we were also thinking about to use the helicopter at the beginning, but then there was not really a need for it because we created a kind of there was no walking path to that hut. So we created a small street up there that could be used during construction, and now we reduced it, and it's the walking path where people can hiking up to the hut. So here you see like these elements of wood that then slowly, step by step, were brought together in the structure. You see like a parametric model, how we developed this entire structure. We also believe that intelligent architecture needs to involve engineers since the beginning and not just after the competitions, not just engineers like structural engineers, but also sustainability is a very important issue. So we developed a kind of structure, and again, I'm coming from the background of Zaha Hadid, where I saw like a lot of things coming, like form testing. I was not so interested in that. We really use like parametric tools in order to optimize structure, but less to generate form. So this is a prototype where you see this rib structure gradually fading into zero. So this is a detail that we really like, because for us this is like optimizing the structure, and structure for us is something beautiful, something that we don't want to hide. It's something that we want to show also in this project. So you see here the only steel beam that is basically used in this project, kind of insulation when they finish the project, and here is the final result. Also in this case, black wood has, in this case, or blackened wood, a certain tradition also there. You know, the natural huts in the area with like rain and sun, after a while they become gray because wood is like working. And so we didn't want to have this basically natural pattern of the sun, because our building was exposed south and north. So we used like a technique. At the beginning we wanted to burn the wood, which is like also a very old tradition, which unfortunately was too expensive. So we found another solution for it. Here is the terrace. You see the entrance. There is this kind of glass that divides the inside, the outside. Here you see the lounge space. Again, this wall that divides the spaces. The furniture is another issue. Of course, we are in Milan. We had a lot of companies that wanted to work with us on that project, but at the end we thought it's not really fitting and we need to go with something contextual. So we were basically working with local carpenters to do a kind of slightly reinvention of the Tyrolean classical chair, which you see here. So he was very happy to work with us on that project, and we modified and designed the furniture by ourselves. Here you see like some outdoor furniture, indoor furniture. Also, this was a funny adventure to bring like the 500 kilo heavy concrete sink up to 2,000 meters. Like when we installed it, there was a little problem, but the client didn't see it, so we were quite lucky. The details of the connection of these ribs into the concrete wall, and the bar when you come in. This is the bar view. And again, nature in this case is the most important, or the project should connect to nature. So I think this image speaks by itself. Another project we have done in Milan for the Salone del Mobile last year. I think maybe a lot of people, I don't know, maybe have been there already. So if you haven't been there, you should go. It's definitely fun. It's a lot of party, especially for the young ones here. So it's a lot of fun for 2 weeks. And here you see some images of the Fuori Salone. So you have always the main Salone, which is in the fair, and then you have the Fuori Salone, which are mostly installations and parties in the city within the center of Milan. And we were asked by Gilda Boiardi from Interni to create an installation in this beautiful courtyard of the Ca' Grande. This is in the center of Milan. And it's the Città Studi, so it's an university. And it's basically the first Renaissance building in Milan, done by a famous architect, Filarete. And our installation was basically playing with the main elements of Renaissance, which are geometry, symmetry, And so we tried to create a kind of wood structure made of 1,600 sticks, made of 3 wings, that it can give again a kind of contemporary interpretation or an answer, a contemporary answer to these main 3 features of the Renaissance. Symmetry, geometry, and proportion. Sorry, I missed the first one. So we came up with this idea, with these layers, to create these 3 wings where you can go in and you can just relax. So we also created like, we will see later, like benches inside where you can basically sit down. It was actually a lot of work, but in the end it was done very quick. I was wondering how they can do that in like 2 days to bring up everything. And here you see, when you enter the courtyard, this is now the installation, the finished one. So you see, for us, the symmetry was very important. So for us, it was very important that our structure really lies down at the entrance and opens up. And you see this kind of physical object from the outside. But for us, was very important the space inside. Like in all our projects, I think the space inside and the perception of the space, I think, is very, very important. In this case, it's really about light and shadow. Here you see like the different layers of architecture. You have like the kind of brutalism. This is a very iconic building in Milan. Everybody that has been there knows it. Torre Velasca in Milan. Brutalism from the 50s. And you have the Renaissance, and then you have our small wood structure there. And again, you can go into this space, and this is an image which really explains a little bit the concept of light and shadow into the structure. So you can really go inside. I mean, people walk a lot these days during the Salone del Mobile, so they're pretty much exhausted. So the idea was, now you see these benches on the side that you can go in and just enjoy the space, relax a little bit, and have this perception of light and shadow inside the structure. It was also quite an adventure to bring all these sticks together. And I think the inspiration in our office, I think, very often comes from art. This is an image or an installation by Carsten Höller, also one of my favorite artists. And this was in Palazzo Strozzi in Firenze last year. And this was an installation where, again, it's not just a physical object that you can see here, but you can really try this, and you can really go into the slides and try them. So this is something what I think is very interesting, that it's not just, again, a physical object, but you can really try the space, or in this case, an art installation you can try out. Welcome to the Dolomites. This is the place where I come from. And there is a lot of things happening in the last years, a lot of construction and tourism, good and bad. You know that years ago, when somebody had a hotel, he was always building it with the same architects. Every 5 years, 10 years, a new renovation. And there is always this competition, you know, between like the neighbor just built a new hotel and has like a bigger spa, so we need to do like a much bigger spa. We need to have more saunas and a bigger pool. In this case, you see again the beautiful UNESCO heritage where I come from, Alto Adige. This is the Alpe di Siusi. You can hiking, you can ski there in the winter. And we were asked by a client, this was again a competition, to restructure his hotel that you see here underneath. So you have this very, I would say, ugly alpine kitsch structure there, and you see again the different times. So like this one was done 20 years ago, then this one was done 15 years ago. A collage of kitsch, let's say. And you see here on the top, this is the small village where this project is situated. And the client was asking us if we want to participate in the competition, and I asked him, like, why do you want to invite us? And he said, I don't know, like, we just heard from you, maybe if you're interested. And he came with the idea to do like a flat roof here, to put like a pool on top and another sauna, and because he needed to have more space. And we said, no, we're not going to do that, and we will not receive that from us, but if you want, we participate. And we came up with a very simple concept, again, to bring nature and the mountains back to the hotel. And in this case, again, to work with local materials, local wood. And we had then later the idea to work with the client's son, that is an artist and was doing them beautiful art photography of the mountains in the hotel. So this was our competition entry. The idea was to open the spaces. The idea was to open this, to remove all this kitsch. We just left a few slabs and a few columns. The rest was totally restructured. And as you can see here, this is the built project now. This is when you see the entrance, when you come from the street side. So the building should open not just towards the mountains on the other side, but should open towards the main street where you come, and towards, of course, the church, the main church that you see in the next image. So these are the rooms. You see here in the background, you see the center, the small church. And again, this opening of the entire structure towards the mountains. You see here the rooms. Also from the inside, we try to create a contemporary interpretation of an alpine style that is really, really reduced in aesthetics. Also here, open spaces, spaces that are connected. And what you see here, this is the artwork that I was talking before with the son Marcin, that was going around 2 weeks in the area to make photos of the mountains in the region. And we had these beautiful installations then in the public spaces as well as in the rooms. You see here some public spaces, the rooms, the restaurant. And for the facade, this is a kind of render. We had like an exoskeleton facade. And you see, we used like chalk that comes from the Dolomites, like in the Dolomite. The stones of the Dolomites is made of chalk. And we use this chalk in the render of the building, in the facade. And you see here this principle, very simple principle of the facade that reacts to the program and the orientation. So you have like the north facade, which is where the public spaces are, where this exoskeleton is more, the exterior structure is more flat, and then it opens up towards south and creates this kind of loggia spaces. So you have like natural sun shading. Some other interior spaces that you see here, the rooms, the last floor, where we used the height of the roof. The entrance, also in this case, for us, the material is very, very important, that it has a relationship to context. We used like, in this case, a stone, and we water cutted it, that it has this very rough effect of the rocks. So we wanted to bring this kind of rocks effect back to our hotel. Some public spaces, the bar, some details. In this case also we tried to almost chop off a floor with an effect that we just like tilted back here, the floor, the garden floor. You see here the construction also, like we had like 3.5 months of construction, which is like pretty tight. I think in Italy it's just possible in the north because all the companies are used to work so fast and they have a very, I think, high quality how they work. So you see here some images. We have this kind of exoskeleton as well, like with the balconies in a wood structure, and then all covered with our rendered facade. You see here the context. So for us, again, we tried to go with the sloped roofs, as you can see here, like the context, and not with the flat roof that our clients were suggesting. But at the same time, I think this building has a certain character within this small village. So that was the idea. Another project, this was our first project, and that we actually did in the office, and it had like it was like published in a lot of magazines, and it's also situated next to Bolzano. It's outside, sits within apple trees, and in this case, the client, you see the house here on top. This is the existing house of the client, and this is the garden of the client down there, where you see the pool, and he had like a little, this little land here in front where we could do like, they wanted to do like very small structures that they can rent, like 40 square meters. But at the same time, the client was asking us that they didn't want to see these buildings because they are in their garden. So we came up with an idea to basically have almost like an artwork in their garden, like with this mirrored glass facade that is reflecting the nature, and this duality of the facade on the other side where you enter the building. So here it opens up, the clients, or basically the guests, they come in from this side, this is east, so the entire building opens up. It's very, very small, and you see here a little bit the context, the apple trees. You can rent these small units. Also in this case, a wood structure, we have a very, very high standard in North Italy in terms of sustainability, which is called Klima House, which is something similar than LEED. Of course, LEED is international, but it's a very high standard. So to build with wood makes a lot of sense. You can do a lot of interesting things, I think, and also in terms of sustainability, I think it's a very great, great product that has a material that has a big future. Here you see the installation of these very, very heavy glass panels on one side, and you see this gradually fading structure without the column. Also here we were debating a lot with the structural engineers, but in the end we made it. This fading facade that opens up into the space, then you have like a sliding door here, you can close the space, and you have this very, very tiny kitchen, a detail of it. And as I mentioned before, you can rent these small units like on booking.com or wherever you want. The interesting part is that after 2 weeks that or a couple of weeks or months that we finished the structure, the client was calling us and was showing us passports of people coming from everywhere in the world. And as I mentioned before, the project was published very widely, and I think in this case, for us, it's also a new way to define tourism, because you don't have, it's not like a hotel, you don't really have like a service there. You have a very small kitchen there, but you need to basically do your grocery. You come there, you can go skiing, you can go biking, but it's not really a hotel. But I think with architecture, you can do a lot of things, and I think this is the proof that kind of new thinking helps. Another project that we just started a couple of months ago, this is in the US. We went to West Virginia the last time a few weeks ago, and there is a client that has a very beautiful lake, and he would like to do like, or we came up with an idea of tree houses. Also in this case, we thought it's a new way or a new approach to not just create like a new units where you can spend your time in nature, but at the same time it should be a cutting-edge project in terms of sustainability. So at the moment we're in contact with a German company, Transsolar, to develop really like a holistic approach for this project, and should be something, a new like engine, let's say, in terms of sustainability. So these are the tree houses where you can come and stay at this beautiful lake. Behind it, there will be a conference center where universities are invited to really debate about sustainability and about new technologies for the future. And these are just a couple of images of these units. Another project which is currently under construction is like a private villa where I come from. There's a very good wine, and this winery is a very famous winery from the place. You see here the hill, their main hill with wine, and we were lucky enough to win also here a competition on top of this small hill. And you see here, this is the city of Termeno. They won a lot of prizes for wine, apparently one of the best now in Italy. And this was our project, coming up again with an idea of landscape to create a kind of house or villa that is really growing out of the hill. And in this case, it's very windy up there. So our concept was to create a courtyard, because otherwise in June, July, and August, you can almost not stay there because it's so windy. Wind that comes up from Lago di Garda, a lake. And so we came up with a very simple concept also here. These are like existing, not listed buildings, so they were just like very ugly, small buildings that they used for the guys that were collecting the apples, and they wanted to tear them down. We have also 3 trees that we wanted to basically build around these 3 existing trees and create this kind of sloped structure that grows out of this hill. And you can see here also in section down here on the right, the problem with the wind. So you have this kind of courtyard that really saves you from this wind, and at the same time from the center of the village, you cannot really see what's happening up there. That was also a request from the client. So you see here the structures. The existing one is basically just the garage and some storages that we start to tear down now the next 2 weeks. And this is our project here. And you see the facade. This construction already started. We needed to create like a new street that brings you up to that hill, because the existing one we didn't want to touch because it was also preserved, and we didn't want to destroy it when you go there, when all the machineries go on site. So we created one from the back. Also in this case, the material, local material, this is called porphyro, which is a local stone from the area. So also here, the idea was to give an answer to wine in this case as well. So it also has like a little bit of red color, and this is a stone from the area. So we will try to build the entire villa as a rock almost that sits on that hill. You see here some interior ideas, and again, the project itself. As I mentioned before, we were lucky enough to work also outside Italy. So this is a project in Abu Dhabi, which is crazy at the moment to work there. We needed like 3 years, and we are still waiting for the building permit there, so it's like crazy. And yes, it's not funny, so because you need to basically submit like not just your preliminary or concept design for the municipalities, but you need to submit the entire schematic design, all details, all structure, MAP, and then they come up, they say like, no, here you need to have instead of 2 meters, 3 meters. So you go back, work again with all the consultants for like half a year or 1 year, and then but now we are pretty close. And this project actually came from an email, like we thought it's a spam email. We didn't even have the office at that time. And I was still in Hamburg working for Zaha Hadid, came back, met Silvana, and we received an email. We didn't even have a proper website at that time. And there was like this guy writing us on a Gmail address, like if you want to do a house for his and his son in Abu Dhabi. Silvana thought it was a spam email. I said, okay, let's write him back. 2 weeks later, we were in Abu Dhabi, and we were there for 1 week doing research. And I think now it's happening. This is our project. In this case, of course, it looks completely different, which is good than the other projects that we're doing. The first thing that we analyzed, of course, when we were there is like privacy. And privacy, the culture is completely different. And so it's not about mostly the exterior spaces, because if you look outside, it's just desert and you don't see anything. But we came up with an idea that everything faces towards the inside. In this case, we came up with this 3 villa that is made of basically 3 villas for the client and his 2 sons. And everything is facing towards this internal courtyard with a water element. That is also a very important feature in Arabic culture. And the outside of the facade is pretty much closed. So we have this mesh rabia, which is a very typical element in Arabic culture as well, that is fading light through the structure. And we see it here also in this case. For us, it's very important to work with engineers and other consultants since the beginning of the project to develop something intelligent together and not just go alone. as an architect and think that you do something great, but it's not. I think we really need to collaborate together these days in order to create something meaningful. In this case, if you ever have been to Abu Dhabi in August, you will see that it's not so funny. You come out of the airport and you think that you're in a sauna with 50 degrees. So of course that's one problem, is the heat and the sun. So we try to come up with a structure that can create intelligent sun shading, and at the same time we try to create a kind of contemporary interpretation of this mesh rabbia, the very typical traditional element that we see down on the left. So in a parametric model we try to filter light, so also the mesh rabbia reacts to the orientation, north versus south, east or west. It's more closing or opening. This is a BIM model. Also in this case, we were not so lucky with the local architect because he never replies our emails, but I think somehow it needs to work. I don't know. Like most of the projects you start, you never know where you end. You know, you just start working and you don't really know what's happening. But that's also the funny part, I think, of our work. This is the courtyard that I was explaining before. So everything faces towards the inside, this water element. You see like this mesh rabbia that creates you privacy and filters the light on the top floor, and it's more open. It will be more dense with palms here, also to create more sun shading in the public spaces. This one is a mock-up that we try to work with a local company of these elements. And we have like on the inside of the villa a kind of skylight that we also try to filter the light with this mesh rabbia structure. Another project in Holland, we were winning a competition for residential development next to Marcin. I think nobody knows where Marcin is. Everybody knows where maybe Amsterdam or Utrecht is. Marcin is outside the city. And there is a big problem in the Netherlands, as well as in the rest of Europe, especially Germany as well at the moment, is the housing crisis. We have the same problem here in the Netherlands. They are like, as you can see here, till 2020, 235,000 units or housings are missing. And there's an interesting fact that when we came there the first time, we talked to the local engineers there, and they were telling us that it's really a fact that older people that live in the countryside, they sell their houses and move to the city. So they really sell their countryside houses and go to live in the city, in the big cities where their kids are living, in order to be more connected. And this, of course, creates problems. And we were invited to this competition in Marcin by an Italian-Dutch developer. You can see here the site, the red site. He owns basically some existing offices that were there from the 60s already, and a small supermarket. And here is you see here is the train station. So this is the direct connection from Amsterdam, Utrecht. And we are situated here next to the canal. And this is the situation where you see on the left side of the canal is this very beautiful, let's say, ancient Dutch style with bricks and these sloped roofs. But we are actually on the other side. We are here where there is basically nothing. And the idea of the developer was to create a project that can really activate this entire area. And he believed that with a competition and choosing like the right project, this would work. So this is what you see here is existing block that will be teared down. And this was our competition entry. I think that also in this case, I think for us it's not interesting to build like in prime locations that we have seen before in Alto Adige. This happens, of course, it's very interesting to work there, but I think it's very important to also work like in areas that are not activated and that are down at the moment. I think there is an example in Milan at the moment, in the south of Milan. They created the Fondazione Prada. There was nothing there before. Now it's a very beautiful museum by OMA with a cafeteria and stuff, and the whole area really started to be activated again. So this was our concept, the looping towers.
A lot of
residential space is currently required in the Netherlands. We were invited to a competition for a residential complex in Marcin. So also in this case, we try to create an intelligent structure, working in this case on the vernacular identity of a duplex, because we are in Holland, and I think this works in Holland. In Holland you have a lot of stairs, very steep stairs, and in this case the units are small, like 50, 60 square meters. And we wanted to create a kind of loop of these tilted towers, also for not overshadowing the neighbor buildings, and to connect this loop with the public spaces and the running track. So here you see the train connection from Amsterdam. Also in this case, it should be a project like for younger generations, to give them a different opportunity where you can say, okay, if you work in Amsterdam or Utrecht, you're there in like Utrecht 10 minutes by train, Amsterdam maybe half an hour. So, but you can live for much less here. You have a train in front, you don't need a car, you know, it should be also the entire garage, or there should be just like mostly electric cars, even if the municipalities are not there yet. That's, I think, another problem of today, that a lot of rules are done that were done like 50 years ago that are just not valid anymore. And I think that's also a main problem if you look at Italy, that there are a lot of rules, and you go to the municipality to talk with them and they show you, yeah, it's written here, but you say, yeah, but come on, we are in 2020 almost, and we talk about rules that were made like 50, 60 years ago. I think there needs to be a radical change as well with that. These are some examples of Dutch brick facades that we analyzed that could be then used for our facade as well. China, I'm happy to be here again. We were winning a competition. I mean, I'm not here in China, of course, in Asia, but I meant like that this was actually our first project in Asia, a competition that we were winning. We don't know if it goes ahead. In this case, the project is in Kunming, outside China. It's very difficult to talk to the client because he doesn't speak English. So every time when we do like a video conference, like I say like 3 words, but then there's a translation that goes like for 20 minutes and I don't know what he's talking about. So, but in this case, it's a mixed-use development of residential, office, and parking spaces. We're here in Kunming, close to almost like down there is Vietnam. And what you see here is the site. So this is like a hill, like it's actually like a small hill, like with a small forest on this hill. And this is the Kunming stone forest. This is something I think very beautiful in the area. And we came up like with again an idea to use wood, because I think wood has a very strong bond with Chinese culture. And in this case, we wanted to create a wood building that sits into a landscape that is inspired by these Chinese rice fields. And this is actually the result, to create like the entire structure of wood, which is not, for new structures, not so typical. I gave a lecture in Garmisch in Germany like last year, and there is really this competition at the moment to build higher and higher and higher in wood. I think like I'm a little bit against that, not in terms of sustainability, but in terms of this race just to go higher and higher, because I think wood also just makes sense, or to build higher in a certain combination with other materials, because otherwise you have a lot of problems. But I think It's to develop a holistic approach and not just to use wood because it's wood. And at the beginning, I was asking about what we are doing in the studio, if it's more a tradition or a revolution. And I think what we are doing is more an evolution. Thank you very much.